Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this wonderfully sunny day. Thankfully, we've finally got a little bit of sunshine. This is a joint round the table with the Oral Health Foundation, Ethical Hour, and Bambooth biodegradable toothbrushes on sustainability in the oral health market. Around about 200 million toothbrushes end up in UK landfill every year, and that kind of spins out to a rather large number worldwide, over billions of toothbrushes sold each year. Now, according to National Smile Month, 43% of the Brits said they'd like to buy a more oral health products, which if it's more recyclable. So what we thought about doing is today discussing why be ethical about how we buy our toothbrushes. So before we start, my name is Ben Atkins. I am the president of the Oral Health Foundation, and I'm sitting currently in my garden under lockdown looking after my two children. One is behind me and the other one's in the paddling pool over there, so I do get cut off. We're in a green environment, so the internet might drop out, but so I'd like to welcome my two guests today. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, I go first. I'm Niamh. My name is Niamh, and I am one of the two founders of Bambooth Limited. So we set up Bambooth, the biodegradable toothbrush, in January 2018 as a sustainable, we'll be using that word a lot, alternative to a manual plastic toothbrush. My background actually is I'm a vet, so another industry guilty of using quite a bit of plastic. I'm a vet, but I also study conservation medicine, so I'm involved with endangered species and conservation and ecosystem health, which really is where my kind of interest in ecosystem health and how ecosystem health, animal health, and human health are all connected started. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you all.
Hi everybody, I'm Sian Conway and I'm the founder of Ethical Hour. We're an online membership community for what we like to call big Y business owners. So any small business that really has a purpose beyond profit, whether that's planet focused or people focused or a bit of both. So we do a lot of work in sustainability, championing a lot of sustainable causes, and doing advocacy work online as well. And inside our membership community, my background is in corporate marketing and business startups. So we give our members access to training and support to help them break out of the echo chamber or the eco chamber, where they're just talking to green consumers, and actually get their products and their services out into the mass market. So really interested to have this conversation today about a different market and how we can raise awareness.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. To give a little bit of background, the Oral Health Foundation does an accreditation system, which is how I've come to meet you two guys, which is fantastic. And the accreditation is for all the oral health products to be sat in front of a panel. Not me, I'm just a dentist. It's in front of professors and people who know about research to actually look at the claims that the wonderful people in marketing claim things do, and you do sometimes question if they ethically do those. So we get the professors and the academics to look through the claims of individual products, and Bambooth has been fortunate to go through that with us, and thankfully you've passed, so that's all good. So it's a really amazing product, and I do, my children already tried to steal the toothbrushes before we did the videos, which is quite difficult when it came to the door, but that's another conversation. They're an amazing product. My worry as a parent is how we're going to leave this planet for my grandchildren and children after us, and the damage that our generation and the previous generations have done, whether through knowing that, or you know, really not understanding what we're doing to the planet. You can see the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases emissions have climbed higher and higher constantly over. Where's the end point, and what has to be that? What is the tipping point? Niamh, what do you feel with your background, especially in the veterinary area? You're seeing this effect in the endangered species. Have we passed that tipping point, or have we still got to go?
It's a really hard question to answer, but what I would say is we're definitely, approaching a tipping point. We're at a tipping point now. I mean, we all know we're at the sixth major extinction event at this point. You know, the loss of biodiversity is just absolutely astounding. You know, we got 39% reduction terrestrial mammals and bird species kind of just since 1970. We've lost nearly 70% of the world's amphibians. So when you start looking at those statistics, you can feel pretty pessimistic, at this stage. And the drivers of that really, are largely down to human behaviour and our consumption patterns, and also how we treat other habitats and ecosystems, and our lack of regard for them, really, not just in terms of what we're consuming and producing in terms of pollution and litter. Obviously, we all know about, the greenhouse gases that we're producing, but also in terms of our expansion, our increasing numbers of settlements, increasing kind of intensification of livestock. I think what we're kind of beginning to learn, hopefully at this point, is that health isn't just human health. Health is global health, and it's one health, really, and that our health and the health of, everyone that we know, as well as animal health, is completely dependent on ecosystem health. So, I think when we look at the figures, you feel a bit pessimistic, all right, but there is a dawning awareness for sure, and even since we started in 2018, there's a lot to be optimistic about. People are becoming more aware and changing their habits, and there does seem to be a growing awareness of the importance of planetary health, really.
So, Sian, why do you feel that single-use plastics are bad for the environment? What's the problem with that?
So this is a really interesting one, because obviously the awareness around plastics has kind of just snowballed in the recent couple of years, really since Blue Planet 2 came out and we all saw that footage, and obviously very emotional seeing the effect kind of almost firsthand of what is happening. Plastic itself is not necessarily bad. We see a lot of applications of plastic where it can be life-saving in health, but the problem is single-use plastic, because this is a material that we extract oil to create, which obviously is a very carbon intense process, and in terms of fossil fuels and things, and then it is going to last for thousands of years. We don't know how long it's going to last, and there is a stat and kind of a little graphic that does the rounds on social media a lot, talking about toothbrushes, that every single toothbrush all of us have ever owned is still out there somewhere. When we throw things away, they don't just magically go away. They go to a landfill, or they end up in the ocean, they end up as litter. So the problem is we're using disposable products made out of non-disposable materials that are going to be around for thousands of years. So that's just piling up and up and up, and that's contributing to all of that damage that you were just discussing around ecosystem destruction. So our attitude towards plastics and the way we're using them is what the problem is here.
And I think, just to add to what Sian is saying there, plastics don't break down, they break up. And that's what we're hearing continually. They break up into microplastics, and that's a whole conversation about the amount we're consuming. People are consuming apparently up to 70,000 pieces of microplastic a year, according to the environmental pollution report just this year. And we know seabirds are dying by the masses. So if we think of seabirds as canaries in the coal mine, for the health of our oceans, there's a big problem there.
Yeah, and I think our own health as well. We don't know what all that plastic is doing to our bodies and our health. And I think it's a really interesting point, talking about that tipping point and whether we have the awareness, and is that awareness turning into action. I think we do have that awareness now. It is turning into action on a micro level with individuals, not necessarily at the legislation and corporate level that we need. But I think with everything we've seen with coronavirus, health has suddenly become a priority globally for everybody at all levels. And that is a good lens to start having this conversation through, because if you talk about the environment and the planet, you're going to reach a certain group of people, but you're not going to reach everybody. Not everyone is going to be motivated by that message. But if you can put it through the health lens, and you can say, look, every time you drink water from the tap, you're ingesting microplastics. Every time you wash your clothes, you're putting microplastics back into the water system. And we don't know what that's doing to our bodies over time and how that's going to affect our health long term. That suddenly becomes a very real, tangible concern for people. And it's doing it without scaremongering and frightening everyone into inaction. But actually, that's quite a good lens to come at this conversation from, to break into that mass market.
As a consumer, it's often quite difficult because we see with the marketing that everything's green or everything's this or everything that, and you suddenly start looking at things, and it's for example, I'm still a little bit dubious about electrical cars because we still don't know the battery powers and the and how much it's going to cost to recycle those batteries that are in the car. You know, different how to restore vintage cars. Well, actually, it's possibly better to restore your same car and keep it for 100 years than it is for. So technology is, as a consumer. So is there a guide? Is there somewhere as a consumer that we can say, well, actually, if you use all these products, you're doing well? Because I think toothbrush is fantastic. We're doing really well there. But washing powder, you just mentioned, Sean. Is that something you work with, Sean, with your different client hats? You know, how does your the blog hour that you do work? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different accreditations out there that ethical and sustainable businesses and products can go for. So some well-known ones that people might be aware of are things like the Fair Trade certification. Very familiar with, you know, coffee and chocolate, but it does apply to other products as well. You know, organic certifications, and then there's things that cover the whole business as well. So there's something called B Corp, which started in America and is now becoming more popular in Europe. And they look at the whole supply chain within a company. They look at their employment practices, everything that company is doing. And you have to score over a certain amount to become a B Corp. And these are kind of external certifications and qualifications that give the consumer kind of a framework that they know this company has met that threshold and has this seal of approval. But as with anything, there are flaws to it. So these all, obviously there's a cost involved. So I work with very small startups in this space, and a lot of them are aspiring to get those qualifications and those certifications, but can't necessarily afford it right now, or don't meet certain criteria, but are working on it. And then you have the big companies that are what we call greenwashing. So they're putting a lot more money into their PR and their marketing to look ethical and sustainable than they are to actually make those changes and alter their supply chain. And we've had, even at the start of this year, I think it was, Coca-Cola, who obviously produce millions of plastic bottles, said that they won't stop producing plastic bottles because consumers want them. So it's really difficult because consumers generally, all the stats are saying we don't want them, we want companies to take action, but the companies are saying, well, we're not going to change, and it's up to you to recycle and do what you should be doing, but actually they need to stop production and find something else. So it is really difficult as a consumer to navigate, but the best thing you can do is to start understanding what greenwashing is. And there's 7 sins of greenwashing, which are things like misleading information, unsubstantiated claims. So if something says natural or green, all of these terms, even sustainable, unless that's tied to a qualification or a certification, that is unregulated. So you could put that label on any product. You could say anything is natural. That's not regulated in any way, shape or form. So it's knowing what questions to ask and what evidence to look for in those business practices.
I think something that you understand as a consumer is the fact it's actually very expensive to change a process. You know, to create a product that ticks all the boxes, because you'll suddenly find something somewhere that you're using as a supply, it supplies your business, suddenly is not. And you're like, well, I've got a resource. That must have been very difficult to create the Bambooth toothbrush.
Yeah.
Did you have to sacrifice any quality to create a product? You must have gone through multiple journeys of the toothbrush to get to that point.
We did. So, I mean, the problem, what you've just flagged there in terms of cost, plastic is so cheap. You know, so competing with plastic products, I mean, they're poured into molds and they set in the tens of thousands. You know, they're generally very cheap products to create, versus other kind of more natural materials, which generally are more costly. Yeah, when we started creating Bambooth, so I actually hadn't heard of a bamboo toothbrush in 2017, and I was actually in China at the time. With my friend, and I was in a gift shop and I picked up what I now know is a bamboo toothbrush, and I really didn't know what it was. And she was like, oh, that's a bamboo toothbrush, because toothbrushes are terrible for the environment. And I couldn't believe that I didn't know that. You know, I was really surprised, because we were aware of our recycling, you know, we're conscious. But in terms of creating a product, when I came back and I started looking into kind of products and, you know, bamboo toothbrushes, you know, what the problem I found was that they were all extremely basic in their design. You know, they were all kind of just really basic wooden handles with, you know, flat bristles, sometimes really, really soft. And I thought to myself, back to your quality issue, you know, we should be able to buy something like this and not sacrifice on performance. You know, we should be able to hold a wooden, you know, handle that's not plastic and not be afraid that the quality and performance isn't as good. So we did actually go through 15 months of prototyping. And the handle was actually carved by Joe, who's my partner and the co-founder. He's a woodworking hobbyist, and he was actually doing a lot of woodwork at the time. So he carved the design, and we did go through then 15 months of prototyping and improving. And it was a long process because, you know, the question of how do you convince people that this is going to work as well as their normal toothbrush. And really, it's also kind of, you know, about creating something that looks appealing, that's attractive, and that's got, as you said, Sian, the certifications and the backing, you know, so that, because that's how you reassure people that they're not sacrificing on quality. You get independent people to assess that, because, you know, you can claim anything you want, but, you know, you need to go out and you need to get independent bodies to certify that, as Sian alluded to. So that was our key thing with Bambooth, you know, not sacrificing with performance or style, you know, being able to use a sustainable product that, you know, functions as well as the plastic alternative.
For me, I love the product. I see a couple of toothbrushes, as you could imagine, when we was walking down. It's a occupational hazard of being a dentist when you've merely been chucked out of the supermarket too many times because, oh, look at this one. Yes, me, it's still a toothbrush. Would you mind keeping walking? We've got to do the supermarket shopping. But I do like the tactile sense of the toothbrush. The interesting part that when I was doing some work on the product was the plastic removed from the nylon. Can you explain that a bit more? For the bristle head?
Yeah. So basically, when we looked into bristles, there is no biodegradable alternative to nylon bristles at this point that's acceptable. So the fully biodegradable option would be hog hair or boar hair, so animal hair, which isn't going to fly for several reasons. And then, you know, other than that, you have composite plastics. So you have some plant-based bristles, which are a little bit controversial at the moment. You know, we're using kind of castor oil instead of petroleum. But they are composite and they're not recyclable. So we stuck with nylon bristles because we know they worked, because we wanted to get the backing of dentists, because, you know, we don't just want green consumers to use this toothbrush. I mean, of course, we want them to as well, but we want to convince people who are using plastic toothbrushes to use this toothbrush. So we want to make it completely comparable to a plastic normal toothbrush in terms of functionality and performance, but just with the biodegradable handle. So we've stuck with nylon bristles, you know, the kind of the industry standard. And we ask kind of people at the end of the toothbrush's life, they can actually recycle those bristles if they pull them out, you know, with the pliers, and they just put them into a bigger container like a yogurt pot, you know, or something that'll hold them in a bigger container in recycling. But, you know, so at the moment there is no biodegradable bristles. We will keep working on that. But yeah, that's a work in progress at the moment.
I like that because it means that we're doing what we can at the moment, rather than, oh, we've got to wait until we're using the equivalent of hog's hairs, because that was, to be honest, that was traditional. It's like our history lessons at university. And it's nice to say, well, actually, this is where we can be. Because if everybody did that, rather than, it's right, it's like I suppose it's like the fancy telephones, the release, look, this is where we're up to now, but we will get better. And that's the whole, if we all did that in everything we did, we'd be a massive step forward with everything.
Absolutely.
But
200 million less plastic handles in landfills just between now and when we come up with something better, you know, if that's in 12 months. There was
a fantastic, well, not a fantastic story, but a fantastic story of a man who collected all the toothbrushes he saw on a walk around the Scottish beaches. There's idyllic beaches, but there's toothbrushes regularly. So how can people trust the claims made on product packaging? Where could they refer? Where could they get that research from? Because you've done it and you believe on it. That's why you've done the product. I understand it because I've had a professor look at it.
Yeah.
How would you say, Sian? How would you say if I didn't know you how could you prove to me that this product is what it says on the tin?
It's a really good question. And I think that's where consumers struggle, because obviously that process takes time, doing that research. And if you think you've then got to do that for every single thing that you buy, I think this is where we need the whole system to change, and we need more regulation, and we need advertising standards to catch up to this kind of eco and green trend. But I think in particular at the moment, again, while we're just doing our best, and it is on us as consumers to do that research, generally if you buy from smaller businesses and you hear the personal stories, and you've got a fantastic story, Niamh, with the whole development and the journey and everything, and if you get to know business owners, through social media and the various platforms we've got that make that so accessible, you can hear about their journey. And it's always music to my ears as a consumer when I hear people say, this is where we're not as sustainable as we could be for this reason, that reason, whatever reason, whether that's cost, whether that's because the product or the material just doesn't exist yet, whatever reason that is. If somebody's claiming to be 100% ethical and sustainable and ticking all the boxes, that's a red flag, because it's very, very, very hard to do that. And I would say in most cases impossible. So finding out kind of the honest answers and the stories about that, looking for those external certifications and credentials and things that they've gone for. If they haven't gone for any, asking that question about why haven't you had this certified yet? Is it in progress? Is it a cost thing? Have you got a roadmap to developing that and getting up to standard? What are you doing about that? Obviously, when it comes to big brands, then it can be harder because they are sometimes less accessible. They've got more money to spend on PR and things, but there are external agencies and people that do this work as well. So a really good one is called Ethical Consumer Magazine. And they have, you do have to pay to access their ranking system, but they rank companies and they look at bigger companies. So when it comes to things like who you bank with, a lot of the big banks invest in fossil fuels. So a big change that you can make if you want to be more climate friendly is to move the bank that you use. And they've done a whole comparison of which banks rank best. But they do that for retailers, they do that for individual products, everything from kind of what cup of coffee is going to be the most ethical and sustainable to which car should you buy, which fridge should you buy, that kind of thing. So there are organizations out there doing it. It's just looking at it through the lens of, is this a small business that I'm dealing with that might not be able to access that kind of level of scrutiny, but are telling me this story and explaining this to me and getting my trust in other ways? Or is this a big corporation, and where are they spending their money? Are they actually spending it in their supply chain becoming sustainable? Or are they spending it at the end of their supply chain on their marketing to look sustainable?
Sorry, Niamh. What's the next stage? I know what business is like. I've had quite a few of my own in the past, and you're always looking at that next stage. Obviously, there's the Bristles. I get that. Are you thinking about other areas of toothpaste? The next individual products, or is your total focus on that range? What's your next stage?
So our focus is on dental actually. Initially, so toothpaste tablets are definitely going to be the next things for us. But trying to get toothpaste tablets that we think are better, because we use toothpaste tablets at the moment, and I can see why some people would have a problem with them. If you're not that way inclined. So again, it's going back to try and make it as good as it possibly can be and as similar as it can be, so that the change is more seamless. So for us, that's the next step. We're in development at the moment, actually, of dental tablets, but we're trying to create things that are things that we would prefer to use, because at the moment, I do find dental tablets a little bit chalky myself. And then interdental cleaners. But I suppose the longer term vision is to try and create good products that'll be great, alternatives to plastic products, but that function as well. Because I think that's where we're at, because, as I said before, a lot of what we've looked at and we've tried to use, it's a better choice, but I'm not sure you could convince many people to do it, because the plastic alternative is better, So I think that's a big hurdle that has to be overcome, and that's kind of our vision in the kind of next year is going to be tablets and interdental cleaners. But beyond that, I think the vision is just trying to eliminate plastics from probably, the bathroom and the kitchen, because that's where I see most plastics are coming from. They're consumables. So they're the two areas I think we could really work on.
Sian, how do you feel that fits to the general market? If you see any other big areas of growth or is it just everything? It's got to go from everything, really. I mean, it's until we get this totally reinvent plastic and say actually it's totally biodegradable. It's and it's not substituting one thing for another that's bad for the environment. It might be biodegradable, but it costs 2 tons of fossil fuel to make the thing. It's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the quality thing is such an important point, because there is a stereotype, and in some areas it's a misconception about sustainable products, ethical products. Particularly, I work with a lot of ethical fashion brands, and there's a lot of stereotypes about what ethical fashion looks like, that it's very neutral colors, that it's not bright, it's not stylish, and these are becoming outdated stereotypes. There's so many brands in the space doing amazing things to suit all different styles. But I think particularly in kind of healthcare and personal products, like you've said, there is still a bit of a gap. And I know I work with one brand that makes solid shampoo bars, and she's got exactly the same mission, that actually a lot of people who've swapped to solid shampoo bars to avoid plastic bottles find that it makes their hair worse, it's not great quality, but they stick with it because they're eco-consumers. And she's actually developed a product that is much better and is, really good quality, and she wants to get that out into the mass market now. And I think for ethical brands and ethical product developers, it is about getting that mass market appeal and breaking down that stereotype and competing in that space, because these eco-consumers are going to do it anyway. You're going to put up with the slightly chalky texture of your dental tabs because you believe in the bigger cause, but not everybody is going to do that. And if you think how convenient plastic is, how cheap it is, how easy it is to go and just buy products that come in plastic, but that's the attitude that we need to take on. And that's not necessarily going to happen just out of the goodness of everybody's hearts because they care about the planet. There needs to be that personal motivation. It needs to be a fantastic product. It needs to be just as convenient. And there's always going to be that price barrier because it is more expensive to create ethical and sustainable products. But again, that's where we need kind of systemic change as well. So I think a lot of this is us as consumers, but also us as citizens, putting pressure on the brands that we buy from, but also putting pressure on the politicians to make sure that money is invested in innovation and resources are available to help companies do this innovation work and change things on a bigger scale, because that's the only way we're going to do it in the time frame that we've got.
I think it's really interesting what you said there, Sian, about colour and neutral tones, because that's something that really hit us. Nature is so bold and so colourful, and it's got more imagination and colour than you could even conjure up in your own mind. So how natural products became so neutral, and that's what we kind of try to do with the colours of the toothbrushes, to name them after kind of ecosystem types, because nature is vibrant. So, I really totally agree with what you're saying. There is sometimes a sense that you have to be a bit of a caveman to use some of the products, that are available. So, I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for joining us today, guys. I think I've been told 40 minutes, and we're coming up on 40 minutes now. So it's one of those subjects you could just go on and on about all day, especially with my children, and discussing that you can't get a petrol car next, you must get an electric car, and the information that's there behind that, and having a little, I think if we can all take a small step every day on thinking about where we recycling plastic, taking it to the right places, using the toothbrushes, using hopefully long term getting rid of plastics totally from our oral hygiene journey, I suppose would be the aim. If you wanted further information on your products, Niamh, where should people go?
So we have a website, so bambooth.com, and it's going to be updated actually in the next couple of weeks, because we're partnered with conservation efforts aimed at habitat protection. So we'll have all that information up in the next 2 weeks. But the website is the best, bambooth.com, and also we're on Instagram at bamboothhq.
Fantastic. And Sian, if we wanted to find more about your ethical journeys, when's your vlog? When's the best time to listen to your stuff that you do?
Yeah, so everything is on ethicalhour.co.uk, and we've got a blog and podcast episodes and things on there. But we do have a weekly Twitter chat. So if you are interested in learning more about ethical and sustainable living, if you're running a business in that space, or you're working for an organisation in that space, every Monday at 8 p.m. UK time, we get together on Twitter using the hashtag Ethical Hour, and we have a different topic every week, and we just kind of break down these topics, have a bit of a discussion. We bring in expert hosts, so they will share information. So obviously all through July, it's been Plastic Free July, so we've been talking about microplastics, we've been talking about changing consumer behaviour, but we like to make it bite-sized. It's just an hour, and you can just drop in your PJs with a cup of tea or a glass of wine and come and chat to like-minded people. So yeah, Mondays 8 p.m. UK time, using the hashtag Ethical Hour on Twitter.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for taking your time out on this sunny day. Get back to the garden or what have you now, or more Zoom calls is whatever we've got to do. If people wanted more information on any of the approved products from the Oral Health Foundation, if you visit our website, dentalhealth.org, and /approved products, you'll find more information on any single thing, to watching out for our logo and what the team does. I'm just a dentist, so I just follow the rules. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.